When you're in the car, you feel like you're taking a torch for everyone, and you don't want to let them down. And that's when I made the decision. And I was like, I want to take the leap of faith and I'm going to go with it.
What's your favourite race ever?
Just like there's the emotions of the roller coaster ride was insane. Really looking back, those were the best days. Different lines you're trying to discover, utilizing the tires, the wind, crosswinds, all these different things. And then you finally get someone in battle. That's the best thing. I love taking risks. I always have.
So Lewis, when the team hit the waves in September, October for the Cup, if they are victorious and if they win, it will be considered one of the greatest moments in sailing history and in British sailing history. Yeah. It will be what would be considered as their moment in time.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to ask you is if you had to pinpoint a moment, and I know there are going to be many of them, but if you had to say this is the one that kind of stands out most for me, what would it be?
I have the worst memories. So.
That's not helpful on this podcast.
No. Pinpoint moment. It would probably been when I decided to join Mercedes. I think that there was a specific time I was in Thailand at the time in between a race after Singapore, and that's when I made the decision. And I was like, I want to take the leap of faith and I'm going to go with it. And regardless of what people say, pretty much everyone told me to stay. And but I went with my gut and my intuition, and it was the best thing for me. Why
was it such a big decision at the time? Just sort of take us back there. So when you're mulling those things over, what was it about it that made it so key?
Well, I mean, I was with a championship winning team. I was with McLaren, which has had such a great history, and obviously Mercedes used to own half of McLaren, and so it was partly their team, obviously. But then they broke away and bought their own team. And as they were trying to ramp up, they weren't having a lot of success. And I think they were like the 5th or 6th best team at the time. So they were finishing often out of the top 10, struggling to get into the top 10. And as a world champion, I think people were like, this is the worst decision you can make. This is not a great team, and your career's over. So that was like all the pundits, all the media outlets, all the fans, everyone was like, career's over. And then it went well, and everyone's like, it's the best decision they've ever made.
So what was driving that sort of inner voice that was telling you, I'm going to do this, I'm going to ignore everything that everyone else is saying, and I'm just going to get on with this and make this my decision and follow it through?
I think it was just really, I wanted a challenge at the time, and I love taking risks. I always have. And also, I never like doing the same thing everyone firstly expects of me. So that's why I never did well at school. And I think, I don't know, I kind of meditated on it. I prayed on it, trying to think of what I wanted to do. And I just loved the challenge. I thought that where I was, I didn't feel like I was being challenged enough. And going into a really uncomfortable position, getting out of your comfort zone is what I love to do, because it's nerve-wracking. But I love that feeling. And that's the feeling you get when you get in a Formula 1 car. And so, but moving into a new team, people I didn't know, having to get integrated, all the changes you need to make, and then the growth process of helping take, a bit like what the team has been doing here in terms of building this crazy boat, if that's what you call it, like it's like a spacecraft, but building it and evolving it and growing towards, all rowing towards a common goal. And eventually getting there is like, that's the greatest feeling when you do eventually do that.
So that must have been just fantastic in 2014 when you won that title together. I mean, what was that? Just take us back to that day and the emotion and the feelings that it conjured up just as a team collectively. Like you say, you got all these people saying this was a bad call, this was a bad decision. I mean, that must have felt really super sweet.
It definitely did. I think I'm into feet in two pots about it. So one, I mean, racing is what I've always loved since I was a kid. When you're in karting, you're all racing wheel to wheel, close with each other. In Formula 1, rules come out, things change, one team's ahead and other teams are playing catch up. And I think in the moment, it was such a whirlwind. So of course I was enjoying it. I was getting to qualify in pole. I was up at the front. We were fighting for this championship, and I couldn't believe that the decision I made was paying off. Like, it's like, wow, it's really, really happening. This is the right thing for me. And so I was riding this beautiful wave. When I look back, I think, was it the most competitive season? I mean, I was competing with my teammate, so he was tough to beat. But in general, you would always prefer that you're competing with several teams. That's what the sport should be doing. But more often than not, that's not the case. But I'm still, I'm still grateful for it, obviously. But I think it was until like my 2015 that I was really, really able to properly enjoy it. The first one I didn't enjoy because it was just, I don't know, it wasn't just a great time for me. The second one was like, I made the right decision and I proved everyone wrong. Great. So I could sleep. But then the next one felt like, okay, this is like, we're here to say this is really, really means something, because that's also what Ayrton won.
And your dad has kind of been a pivotal part of your life, your entire career as well. I was reading to my son a book which was about you recently, and one of the lines talks about when you both went remote control car racing together, and then you won that particular championship, and you were sat on the back of his car eating bacon sandwiches and noodle soup. I mean, what has that journey been like for the two of you? Because that must have been extraordinary to sort of get to that place where you feel like we're in the beginning of something extraordinary here with this team. Yeah,
I think, well, firstly, as a kid, you're just having fun. So, I mean, really looking back, those were the best days. Through karting, through traveling throughout the UK, up north into the cold, and the raining days.
Really?
Sitting back in the back of the trailer. Those, when it's scruffy.
Super simple.
Yeah, just the smell of the fuel and tires and everything. It's I was helping my dad mechanic. So those, honestly, as a kid, were the best days, because you feel like you're doing something with your dad. And that's like a bonding experience.
Hello performance people, listeners, my name is Freddie Carr and I host a podcast called The Inside Tack, which is a podcast that follows the British America's Cup team, INEOS Britannia, as we get ready for the 37th America's Cup down here in Barcelona. We also follow the youth and the first ever Women's America's Cup. We would love you to like and subscribe to our podcast. Follow us on all your social media channels as we get ready for our sporting challenge of a lifetime.
I loved those days, and then getting out on track and doing what I love, mostly starting at the back and having to work my way forwards. It was just really cool, and I was having to work with my dad in order to get us to the front. So, but it's obviously a really long process. It doesn't happen overnight. So it's like I started when I was 8. I didn't get, then you're moving to the next category after a few years, then the next category, then the next category. So you're starting from scratch not starting from scratch, but you're starting over each time up against a new group of kids. And it gets harder as you get to your mid-teens, because the boys get a bit more aggressive. And then you get to cars. That's when the money comes in, and when you damage the car, it costs a lot. Yeah, and you feel it because you're going a lot quicker. So just like there's the emotions of the roller coaster ride was insane. But then when you finally get to Formula One, and I couldn't, even though I got signed in 2006, I think it was, end of 2006, you still don't believe it till the moment you're sat on the grid and you're starting the race.
And then what does that feel like?
I was like, they're not going to take me out now. Like, I really am. I have made it. And
is that a real pinch yourself moment?
Well, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, still today, I have to pinch myself very often. It's because I very much, even though I have a bad memory, I do remember a lot of those early days and the struggles that we went through. the doubts, and will we make it, will we not, and also just seeing my dad in the garage, just how hard he was working. I don't know how they did it, to be honest. So I just then grabbed the wheel with both hands and this is every single time is an opportunity. I'm not going to squander it.
Yeah, and presumably it never feels like it's just you out there, because you say, it's such a big team sport, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily give that the credit for what it is. But do you feel kind of carrying the hopes of a team?
For sure.
Every time you sit in that car, have you learned how to manage that pressure, or were you always good at it?
I think probably less aware or conscious of it or understanding of it probably at the beginning, because you from Formula 3, Formula 4, you're already starting to work with a team. But there's a different scenario because you're paying to them to service you, sort of thing. You're bringing in sponsorship, and it's a different kind of journey. But then when you're an actual employee, you're working with a group of people, and interaction is everything, communication is everything. And you go back and you see how hard everyone's head down at the desk. You see everyone working all year long, even through Christmas. It's a real decision you take to put a certain amount of effort into anything, right? And to perfect something, to be a master of something. So then when you're in the car, you feel like you're taking a torch for everyone, and you don't want to let them down. So that's something I learned more of as I got older. To embrace that and gel more within a team, and the importance of that. That's how you ride the wave the highest, when you have the team with you.
Yeah, and you have highs and you have lows. It's interesting, earlier your eyes lit up when you were talking about the idea of coming from the back of the grid through the crowd, as opposed to just starting on pole.
Yeah.
What does that give you that sort of a procession of a race doesn't?
Oh God, it's so boring when you're honestly starting from first, leading the race all the way through, and it's really boring compared to fighting from the back and having racing, because it's not racing. It's you could be on a test. I mean, you are fighting a time gap behind you. You have to psych yourself into thinking that you're fighting just a car ahead or something like that. You have to be chasing something. But it's different when you have a car or cars ahead of you, and you're trying. And there's a track that you can overtake, like Austin or Silverstone, for example, and you. Different lines you're trying to discover, utilizing the tires, the wind, crosswinds, all these different things. And then you finally get someone in battle. That's the best thing. So that's the most rewarding experience as a driver.
What's your favourite race ever? Can you recall that?
Favorite race of all time?
Your favourite race of all time?
I've done too many, probably.
Can't recall it.
Yeah, I think one of my favorites was. I have a few. So I think it was 1995 or 6 in karting in Buckmore Park. I was 4th all the way in this race, and I couldn't keep up with the top 3. I just couldn't get closer. And then the last lap, they were all squabbling, and I overtook them all in one corner, and I won this race. And that was one of those reminders of just to never give up. It's never over until it's over. So that was the first step that I particularly remember. And then Formula 3. Formula 2, I spun in Turkey. I can't remember, I was 6th to last or something like that. And on that scene, the Formula 1 teams are watching you. So I was like, just every single moment, every movement that I do, I know Ron, who was my boss at the time, or my sponsor.
Phone me in 9 years, Ron.
Yeah, I know he'll be sitting on the wall watching, or in his office watching. So made that mistake, and I was like, damn, in my mind, I was like, that's veered me off of getting to Formula 1. And so I drove back from, I think it was 20th or something like that, to 2nd. So that's one particularly that I remember. And then probably my wet race in Silverstone 2008 probably was one of my favorite, probably best performances ever, I would say.
Yeah, and in front of a home crowd, so what isn't there to
Exactly.
love? So what do you see the synergies are between your world of F1 and the Cup world? When you walk around this base here in Barcelona, what do you look at and go, oh, this is ringing true?
Well, it feels very much like our team in terms of our factory back in Brackley. And for example, just seeing the mast as you walk in, it's just, okay, you realize the technology is very, very advanced. But I think the first time I'd been into sailing was back in, I think it was like 2008, and I got to sail around the Isle of Man. That was with a sponsor at the time, and it was it's so much fun, and I was actually at the helm. So, and I got to experience everything on that 4-hour ride. I was definitely feeling very sick because it was very choppy that day, and we crashed at the beginning. But to see the technology evolve to what it is today, I mean, when I go around the boat, I'm like, that's from...
Makes sense.
That's from my engineers. That my designers our designers back at the factory have designed, a lot of those mechanisms that are underneath inside the boat. It feels like finally feels like the Formula One of the racing world. But back in 2008, it didn't have any of that technology.
Yeah.
So maybe it was carbon fiber. Maybe it was one of the first carbon fiber boats, but this is something else.
And what's your message for the team as they go and head out and try and grab this cup, seize this cup finally after 170 odd years?
Honestly, I know so little about it. I mean, I just went into the sim room now and we just tried I tried the sim, for example, and I'm like, there's numbers all over the dashboard that I don't fully understand. Just switches and buttons all over it felt like being in a completely different series. But I have a steering wheel. I know I'm going left and right, but there's all these other mechanisms to help catch the wind and reducing, drag and all these different things. So, I mean, they don't need any advice from me, but I think just to know that they've got a huge amount of support and working as a team, which they have to do. Communication is everything. So just staying positive and continue to believe you can do it.
Great. Lewis, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Join us for the Performance People podcast every week for the highs, lows, lessons and stories from people like this lot. Michael Johnson.
Some days what I would see is a person who is a shell of what I used to be.
Eddie Hearn.
We don't operate in a business that's dangerous, but we just operate in one where you've got to sleep with one eye open.
Mo Farah.
It couldn't get any harder than what I've gone through, and at that point I just went for it.
Paula Radcliffe.
You can only control yourself.
Susie Wolf.
And Toto did once liken me to a donkey.
Every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts.